Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper, beginning with a news item on page number 1 of the Delhi edition of The Hindu dealing with online political advertising. Political parties and their candidates have used social media to campaign in the elections. It is increasingly felt that in the near future, elections will be fought on social media instead on the dust of Indian villages, towns and cities. We still do not know whether social media influences the voters' choices or not, and if it does, to what extent. Even then, candidates throughout the world have used social media. Some time ago, it was alleged that Russia interfered in the US elections. How? Russian agencies, what they would do, they would sponsor advertisements on Facebook, on Google, for example, to influence the voters' behavior. And guess what? Voters didn't even know they were being influenced. Why? Because how could they differentiate between a news or a Facebook post or a Twitter tweet and a sponsored content? There was no way to differentiate. After the hue and cry, Facebook, Twitter and Google came together and agreed to a voluntary code of ethics. These social media giants said from now onwards, if any candidate or party would want to sponsor content on social media, the users would know about it. How? The users would know that it is a sponsored content, because next to a Facebook post or a Google ad, it will be displayed that this content has been sponsored by candidate A, political party B or C, so on and so forth. And since February in India, this data is available. And according to this data, 39.1 crore has been spent on Facebook advertisements, and on Google, the amount is 29.3 crore. But what this newspaper article is all about, it says, despite this code of ethics, we still do not know what is the source of 3 top spending Facebook pages. And this is where we need to understand something about MCMC as well. These committees, they deal with paid news and they also deal with certification of political ads. That means if a political party has to set up a hoarding or publish an advertisement in a newspaper or have an advertisement on any news channels or entertainment channels, certification and permission from MCMC is required. And these MCMCs have been set up at the district level as well as at the state level. And it was the Supreme Court order of 2004 that instructed for the setting up of these MCMCs. But according to this newspaper article, it is still not clear whether these Facebook pages and the ads they sponsored on Facebook, whether they had the clearance from MCMC or not. That is something that you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another news on page number 1. A new political map of India has now been redrawn. Why? Because this new map should depict the newly formed Union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and the Union territory of Ladakh. And this is how the new map of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh looks like. But from this newspaper article, we need to understand what is this Survey of India. Survey of India is the national survey and mapping organization of the country. And there are 2 important details that you must know about Survey of India. Number 1, it comes under the Department of Science and Technology, a very important statement for your prelims. Number 2, it is the oldest scientific department of the Government of India. It was set up way back in 1767. These 2 are very important statements, can be a potential question for your prelims examination. But what is the responsibility of the Survey of India? It is the sole authority for publishing maps. It is the sole authority responsible for naming of geographical places as well as the spelling of their geographical features, so on and so forth. That is the significant role and function performed by Survey of India, and that is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. There is another news on page number 1. Naga groups pushing for a separate flag. They're also pushing for a separate constitution. And this is something that we have discussed in detail in our 23rd October 2019, the Hindu newspaper analysis. We won't discuss this issue unless and until we have something concrete on this Naga peace accord. So unless and until this Naga peace accord is formalized, or the groups that are pushing for a Naga peace accord, unless and until they decide to withdraw from this Naga peace accord process, we will not discuss this issue. Let's have some clarity on this matter and then we will proceed. Now let's look at another news. Defense Minister Rajnath Singh has urged Shanghai Cooperation Organization to fight terror. Let's understand some of the facts related to Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This SCO is a permanent intergovernmental international organization. The creation of SCO was announced in the year 2001. The charter of SCO was signed in the year 2002, and this charter entered into force in the year 2003. These are very important details regarding SCO. But what is the significance of this charter? It is this charter that is the fundamental document of Shanghai Cooperation Organization. It is this charter which outlines what are the goals of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, what are the principles that govern this organization, what is the structure of this organization, what are the core activities of this organization. All this is outlined in this charter. SCO is an 8-member organization. Which are these 8 members? China, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan. India and Pakistan were not originally part of SCO. They were admitted to this Beijing-based regional security grouping in the year 2017 when the SCO summit was held in Astana. But what are the main goals of Shanghai Cooperation Organization? One of the major goals is promoting cooperation in politics, trade, economy, research, technology, education, etc., etc. That's one of the major goals of SCO. Another important goal is let's have joint efforts. Joint efforts so that there is peace, there is security, there is stability in the region. Another important goal is establishment of democratic and fair international political and economic order. One more important detail is that there is a supreme decision-making body of SCO, and that is what is called Heads of State Council. And this Heads of State Council meets every year. This SCO has 2 permanent bodies. One is the SCO Secretariat, and this Secretariat is in Beijing, China. And another permanent body is the Executive Committee of RATS, Regional Anti-Terror Structure. And this structure is based out of Tashkent. SCO also has 4 observer states, can be another potential statement for your prelims examination. And how can you remember these observer states? There is an acronym for that called BIMA. B stands for Belarus, Iran, Mongolia and Afghanistan. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at the FAQ page of today's The Hindu newspaper. You must skip the science and technology page of today's newspaper. Most of these articles are research based and not relevant for your examination. Let's look at the first article. Why is the telecom sector under stress? And to understand this newspaper article, you need to understand what is AGR. And AGR stands for Adjusted Gross Revenue. And it's a very important term because AGR determines what is the license fee that a telecom company has to pay the government. AGR determines what are the spectrum usage charges that these telecommunication companies have to pay to the government. Because today, 8% of your AGR is the license fee to be paid by a telecom company to the government. SUC are in the range of 3 to 5%. That means 3 to 5% of AGR are the spectrum usage charges to be paid by the telecom companies to the government. There is a dispute on AGR, and this dispute is since the year 2005. In the year 2005, there was a dispute about the definition of AGR. And this dispute has now finally been resolved by the Supreme Court of India after 14 years. But it is because of this Supreme Court order that one reason why telecom sector is under stress. Now let's understand this newspaper article in slight detail. There are two sides, telecom companies and the government. The argument of the telcos was that AGR should only include those revenues that these telecom companies generate from providing telecom services only. That means the amount of money generated by telecom companies by charging the consumers for data, for voice services, for SMS, for MMS. All these revenues that have been generated by providing these telecom services, only those revenues should be included to determine what is this adjusted gross revenue. But government had a different take. Government said no, all revenues by telecom companies, including non-telecom related sources, should be part of AGR. Government said even if you have deposits in the banks, the revenue that you generate from these deposits should also be included in AGR. If you have sold some buildings or your assets, the money that you have generated by selling off your assets, that should also be part of AGR. Higher the AGR, more the revenue to the government, but higher the AGR, more the license fee and more the SUC charges to be paid by the telecom companies to the government. That is where the dispute was, and now what Supreme Court has said, the definition of AGR given by the government is correct. So now what you have to do, since 2005, all these payments you will have to pay to the government, including the interest, including the penalty. And the total amount is close to 1.4 lakh crore. And that is why the cellular operators in India, Airtel, for example, Vodafone Idea, they have written to the telecom ministry that we should not be forced to pay such a huge amount of money. If we are forced to pay such a huge amount of money, the entire telecom industry will collapse. Reliance Jio says, no, we must pay this amount of money to the government. Why? Because Jio is a new player. It started operating only from 2016. So the liability of Jio is only 16 crore or 14 crore rupees. That means Jio has to pay only 14 crore rupees to the government. But in return, Vodafone Idea, Airtel, they have to pay 42,000 crore and 40,000 crore. That means Vodafone Idea and Bharti Airtel would be under huge stress. And if these two companies are under huge stress, that is why telecom sector is also under stress. But what about other players? Since the charges date back to 2005, almost all the other companies, they are virtually bankrupt. For example, 10 of the other telecom companies, they have closed their operations or they are undergoing insolvency proceedings. If you include Reliance Communications, Telenor, Tata Docomo or Tata Teleservices, Aircel, Videocon, all these, they have shut their shop. So they can't pay the amount of money that they owe to the government. So who is left to pay? Bharti Airtel and Vodafone Idea. And there are also reports which suggest that Vodafone Idea may exit the Indian market. And one principal reason is this liability that Supreme Court has asked these telecom companies to pay, that too within a period of 3 months. But this is not the only reason why telecom sector is under stress. If we look at the data charges, if we look at the phone charges in this country, they are lowest in the entire world. And that is thanks to the entry of Jio. Jio has created a competitive environment, and that is why the tariff for voice calls as well as for data is almost lowest in the whole world. That is why Vodafone Idea as well as Bharti Airtel, they have been writing to the government that all these tariffs as of now, they are unsustainable. And we will not be in a position to sustain in the market if we are not allowed to raise the tariffs. But the government has said we can't do anything in this regard because ultimately this is the domain of Telecom Regulatory Authority of India. So this column as well as the column in today's Live Mint, they suggest that maybe it is time that we will have only one government player in the market and at most two private players. Because now the government has made its intention clear that we are going to merge BSNL and MTNL. And if Vodafone Idea also exits from the market, the only two private players left would be Airtel and Jio. But ultimately, it is not a good sign for the customers, because if there is less competition in the market, some sort of monopoly will be created by these two organizations, these two telecom companies, and the variety, the choices offered to the consumers will be very less. That's not a good sign for the customers. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another news. What is the project to develop or redevelop Lutyen's Delhi all about? There are a few deadlines. By 2022, when India will celebrate its 75th Independence Day, we should have either a new parliament or the existing parliament should be renovated. By the year 2024, we should have a common central secretariat. But the real question is why? British built Parliament House. They built the North and the South Block, which contained the offices of the Ministries of Finance, Home, Defense, External Affairs, so on and so forth. After independence, many other government offices were also added. For example, Shastri Bhavan, Krishi Bhavan, Nirman Bhavan. Sir Edwin Lutyen designed the Rashtrapati Bhavan. But if we look at our Secretariat building, if we look at our Parliament House, it was designed by Herbert Baker. Can be an important question for your prelims examination. However, the problem is that the buildings built by British, they are not earthquake, while the buildings that came after 1947, they are prone to fires. Also, as the government business and work increased, there was a need to add more and more offices. And the government of India rented more offices for which it has to pay close to 1,000 crore every year as a rent. Members of the parliament have also been asking that we should have offices in the parliament, because as of now, the space in the parliament is very less, and that is why in parliament, office spaces are assigned only to the ministers and not to every single member of the parliament. That is why the government has issued a deadline that by the time we celebrate 75th independence anniversary, we should have a new parliament or the existing parliament should be renovated. There should be a common central secretariat. We should redevelop the central vista. And what is the central vista? The 3-kilometer long Rajpath. And the Gujarat-based architecture firm HCP Design Planning and Management Private Limited will serve as the consultant for this project to redevelop Lutyen's Delhi. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at another article on the FAQ page, Sequencing Indian Genes. But let me tell you a story first. Some months ago, a woman who was 3 months pregnant, she came to see a pediatrician in Kozhikode. She had a request. She wanted to know if there was a way to find out if her unborn child could develop a rare immune disease. Why? Because her first daughter was suffering from one rare immune disorder. The doctor took up her request and reached to Institute of Genomics and Integrative Biology in Delhi, which is run by CSIR, Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. What the scientists at IGIB did, they used genome sequencing to find out the exact abnormality in the first child. This information was used to find out if the fetus too carried the same abnormality. Tests were done and it was found that the fetus did not have the genetic abnormality. A disease or disorder is said to be rare if it affects 1 in 2,500 individuals. Nearly 7 crore Indians suffer from rare genetic disorders. And what is the result? Massive medical and economic burden. But maybe the worst is over. India has just concluded a 6-month pilot project of sequencing Indian genes or genomes for healthcare and biomedical use. And this project is what we call IndiGen project. If you look at genome sequencing, it is a process for analyzing the sample of DNA. This DNA sample is taken from your blood, and in laboratory what technicians do, they extract DNA from the blood and prepare it for sequencing. How? Within every normal cell, there are 23 pairs of chromosomes. 23 pairs of chromosomes, that means 46. 23 we inherit from mother, 23 we inherit from the father. Most of the DNA is coiled in these chromosomes. The remaining DNA is in the powerhouse of the cell called mitochondria. What are these chromosomes? Chromosomes are basically those structures which house the DNA. And DNA is coiled into a shape called double helix. I understand that majority amongst you are from non-medical background. That is why I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. What is genome sequencing? Basically, it is a process for analyzing a sample of DNA that is extracted from your blood. Every cell has 23 pairs of chromosomes. And what are these chromosomes? Chromosomes are basically structures that house these DNAs. And DNA is coiled into a shape called double helix. This double helix structure can be unwound into a ladder shape. How? That means basically the DNA is coiled into a shape called double helix, but this double helix can be unwound into a ladder shape like this. This ladder is made up of letters called bases. Our DNA contains about 6 billion such bases, and there are 4 letters. Which are these 4 letters? Let's say A, T, C, G. In DNA, base A joins only base T, base C joins only base G. Let's say, for example, it is like this. This order and sequence of DNA letters is very important. And this DNA sequence is what we call a gene. To make it even simpler for you, your DNA is like an instruction book. It contains instructions for living things to develop, to grow, to function. Variation in any of these DNA instructions can make a difference as to how an individual looks, how an individual responds to medicines. For example, there can be a certain gene that can make people less responsive to a drug which prevents heart attack. That means a certain gene can make people less responsible to a drug or to a particular type of a treatment. And if this is known to a doctor, then we can suitably design a treatment procedure for this individual. And that's the whole crux of this genome sequencing. That's what is written here. Sequencing a genome means deciphering or finding out the exact order of base pairs in an individual. This indigent project is funded by Department of Biotechnology. That is what you need to understand from this newspaper article. Now let's look at the prelims based question. Number 1, consider the following: carbon monoxide, methane, ozone, sulfur dioxide. Which of the above are released into atmosphere due to the burning of crop biomass residue? All of them. Question number 2, which of the following statements are correct regarding International Civil Aviation Organization? It's a specialized agency of the United Nations. Yes. It is an autonomous body but works with the United Nations. But it's a specialized agency of the UN. All the 193 members of UN are members of ICAO. No, because Liechtenstein is a member of the United Nations, but there is no international airport here. So statement 2 is wrong. The Convention on International Civil Aviation is the governing statute of ICAO. Correct? CICA, this convention states that the treaty shall be applicable only to civil aircraft and shall not be applicable to state aircraft. So which of these statements are correct? 1, 3 and 4. C is the correct answer. What is the context? Prime Minister Modi's airplane was denied permission by Pakistan aviation authorities. India complained to ICAO. ICAO said we can't intervene because we can deal only with the civil aircraft, not with the state aircraft, because Prime Minister Modi's aircraft would come under the category of state aircraft. Among the following, which one is the largest exporter of rice in the world in the last 5 years? India. Prelims based question: for the measurement estimation of which of the following are satellite images or remote sensing data used? Chlorophyll content in the vegetation of a specific location, we can use remote sensing data for that. Greenhouse gas emissions from rice paddies of a specific location, yes. Land surface temperatures of a specific location, yes. So all these statements are correct. Mains based question, today we have got 2 essay topics for you. One is Happiness is not an ideal of reason, but of imagination. Second, science is organized knowledge. Wisdom is organized life. That is it from our newspaper analysis for today. Thank you for being with us. Have a great day.